Name of the teacher this morning is Kohelet. Kohelet is the actual word that's used to describe the one who addresses us in Ecclesiastes. It's a Hebrew name that's derived from the root kohel, meaning to gather or to assemble. Kohelet then is the gatherer, and he gathers not just students, but things, words. Ecclesiastes, from which we get the English terms ecclesial and ecclesiology, church, ecclesia, is a Greek and Latin expression. It also means gathering. So I think that's significant as we kind of get started in thinking about Ecclesiastes and what it means to get wisdom, to acquire wisdom. Kohelet is one of those teachers who wants to bring everything into conversation, into dialogue. In fact, you'll notice as we go through the chapters in Ecclesiastes that there's often contradictions, right, from one to another. It seems as if there are two voices, at least, right, in conversation with each other. There's a pessimistic voice, and we'll talk about that. There's a despairing voice, but there's also a voice that seems to say, and yet, nevertheless, right? And it's pretty interesting as we pay attention to it. But Kohelet starts off asking a question, and he starts off with a summary statement that goes like this: vanity of vanities. All is vanity. And right away, I hear the word vanity, and I leap into the lyrics of that infamous song, "You're so vain. You probably think this song is about you. You're so vain, right? Or I click on the computer link for Kim Kardashian's selfie, and she always has a selfie, the one in which she's looking admiringly at her enormous buttocks. Vanity of vanities. Or I worry about my gray hair and my wrinkles. Or I ponder that this piece of furniture, Cheryl reminds me, this mahogany table in front of an ornate mirror, it's called a vanity. Or I notice how certain egotistical politicians who shall go unnamed take overt credit for the raging economy or the possibility of peace in North Korea, even though they don't deserve any credit. Vanity. Or I rehearse the classic line from Gladiator in which the Roman emperor Commodus is confronted at the Colosseum by Maximus, who says, this is a classic line, "The time for honoring yourself will soon be at an end, Highness." Okay. Vanity. But then I remember that Kohelet has a lesson which hinges upon the word all, and which relies upon the framing elements of the ancient world: earth, fire, air, and water. Right? If you notice in the first few verses, there's mention of earth, air, fire in the form of sun, and water in terms of streams and ocean. Moreover, if I'm tempted to unload on the narcissism of particular people in my life or to complain about the most prominent people in the world, Kohelet holds that temptation in check by offering this one question. Here it is. What do all people gain from all their toil? All people, all their toil. If the answer here is they gain nothing, lesson over. But it's clearly not over. There's another option. What we gain is unique experience, which is experience that cannot be duplicated or produced on a mass scale for mass consumption. Let me say that again because I think it's really important. What we gain is experience, unique experience. Think about the pine cones that Jonah just showed us, right? He had this unique experience, and what was his first instinct? I want to show people, right? I want to show people during worship. Is this okay? Pastor Scott, can I do this, right? I think somehow we lose that, right? Over the years, we lose that sense of awe and wonder at our own unique experience, and we think, what do we get out of it, right? Just think about that phrase. What do we get out of an experience, right? Something we can like take home, right, and keep to ourselves. What do we get? Instead of thinking, what do we have? What are we involved in? What are we embedded in? Anne Lamott, who recently came to Spokane and spoke at the Fox Theater as a part of Get Lit, she describes an image that sticks out from her childhood. It seems her brother, when she was a child and he was a child, had a report due on the subject of birds. And he procrastinated, like some do. And he procrastinated for so long that the project was due the very next day, this was a Sunday, and the immensity of the project was now just overwhelming. It was emotionally paralyzing to this 9-year-old boy. And Anne Lamott's brother just couldn't get started, and he couldn't focus until the boy's father intervened and set the boy down at the kitchen table. He literally sat him down and sat next to him with all the books on birds. And the father said, "Take it bird by bird, buddy. Bird by bird. All things are wearisome. But the reason they wear on us is that we want them to satisfy our desire. And desire is never satisfied. You realize that, right? I mean, the whole point of desire is desiring, right? It's if you get what you desire something else, right? And so the very experience, right? Think about this. The unique experience of desire is the thing, right, that can teach us the most. What is it that we're truly desiring? I want. I crave. I don't want necessarily like a consumer wants to buy something and store it in my cupboard. I don't want like a collector wants to get something and say, wow, look at this baseball card that I have, right? I want to acquire all things not out of a sense of compassion, but voraciously and vociferously, as if having them in view or in my possession somehow secures them to me. An 11-year-old girl walks along the shoreline of a lake in eastern Tennessee, and she spies unusual markings on a rock. It turns out to be a fossil, a 470 million-year-old trilobite fossil. And the paleontologists are elated, and the museums are asking, Riley Taylor, 11-year-old girl, how much? How much do you want for this fossil? And can you imagine? Can you imagine not what it's like to have a Paleozoic artifact in your hands just to find it, but perhaps someday, and here's the kicker, to be a fossil. Dan knows what that's like right now, right? I know that sounds morbid, but I mean, just the fact that I can think, right, that something that I leave, an impression, a footprint, or something that I leave could be found by another human being. Isn't that what's most interesting? The relationship. The relationship that I want with someone, somewhere. And yet, what has been is what will be, says Kohelet. And what has been done is what will be done. There's nothing new under the sun. One of the amazing dynamics of gathering to learn from God is that we're not simply compiling information. We're not simply checking things off a list, trilobite fossil, check. That is vanity, right? Hawaii, check. Hockey game, check. Golf, check. Right? That is vanity. What's not vanity is paying attention to the unique experience and the relationships. What is at stake in our peculiar relationship with things? This word, dabar in Hebrew, it means both word and thing. And I think one of the things that Ecclesiastes is inviting us to do is not just let it be a word or an idea. I had no idea. But let it be an experience. Romans 8:19 makes this wild and unruly claim. For creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, to vanity, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. Now, when I read that passage in the New Testament, on the heels of Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun, the lesson takes a turn. Suddenly I can appreciate the wisdom, the profound wisdom of a tenacious skepticism. And suddenly I can appreciate the wisdom of a returning and relentless faith. Skepticism, faith. I doubt it, I hope. I doubt it, I hope. This week I rented a rototill, and I rototilled most of the plots in the garden. And it was pretty awkward, right, to get the rototill into the plots and do the job. But I was really conscious of the fact that Renata, who's not here today, hi Renata, she had garlic that she had been growing for 2 years. And I said, okay, I do not want to rototill that particular plot. Renata, right? I value Renata and her garlic. But I made a mistake. And I rototilled that garlic into oblivion, right? So Thursday I come and I let Renata in, and she's doing a World Relief thing with a woman from the Ukraine. And she's showing the woman from Ukraine her garden plot where her garlic used to be. And when I arrive, she looks at me and he says, "You did the wrong one," right? And I just thought about that moment of, I knew that she forgave me. And here she was about to teach this woman from Ukraine, and that experience, right? That's what teaches me. That's my wisdom, right? Not anything else. In the film Contact, the clip that I showed you, Ellie Arroway is a scientist who's been waiting for contact with extraterrestrials. And what's extraordinary is that in that scene, she's passing through a wormhole, and she loses, if you saw her, a necklace that had been given to her by her father, right? And so she cuts herself free from the chair that it's eventually going to break, and she reaches for it and grabs it, and then she goes and she looks at this celestial event, she says, and she's a scientist, and she says, there are no words for this, right? I don't know if you heard it. They should have sent a poet. They should have sent a poet. There are no words. And then she repeats, I had no idea. I had no idea. I guess today all I want to say is that the experience is the teaching thing, and there's nothing else we get from it, simply the experience. Arroway says later in the film, when she's trying to prove herself, she says, I had an experience. I can't explain it, but everything that I know as a human being, everything that tells me that it was real, I was given something wonderful, something that changed me forever, a vision of the universe that tells us undeniably how tiny and insignificant and how rare and precious we are. A vision that tells us that we belong to something that is greater than ourselves, and that we are not, that none of us are alone. I wish I could share that. I wish that everyone, for one moment, could feel that awe and humility and hope. And that continues to be my wish. Now here we are at Origin, and you and I have unique experiences. And my ecclesiastical hope is that we can channel those experiences and share them like a foothold in the midst of a world that simply hears the despair. Koheleth offers wisdom in the dialogue. Amen.